I almost died of anemia, actually, because I just didn't have time to go to the doctor. I went off to Las Vegas, and when I stepped down from stage, there's a text message from my doctor that says, go immediately to the nearest ER and tell them your hemoglobin is 5.4. Arrive in the ER, tell them, hey, my doctor told me my hemoglobin is 5.4. And she's like, no, it's not, because you'll be laying in a coma on the floor. So yeah, you absolutely sacrifice your health over this process.
Christian, when we first did this, I don't know, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory age, probably about 15. Thank you so much for joining me once again on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, yeah.
Now, listen, the pleasure's all mine. I would love to start, though, with actually the announcement that you made a week or so ago about Tradeshift and your position there. Can you start by just telling us about the position change there and what's going on?
I've been CEO, co-founder, and chairman for Tradeshift for 14 years. It sounds crazy even saying that number. You know, it was inseparable from my life, I think, in every way. And I think this year especially, I have done a lot of reflection over how the last few years has been, and also a reflection of not being happy. And I think as founders, and often as founders, as CEOs, we think we just have to keep doing the job no matter what. For me, it was really important to get to the company to a place where it was really good shape. But I also made the decision, I think, a long time, like early this year, that I would find and figure out transition and move to what's next. It's probably the hardest decision in my life, and I had no clue how to do it. There was very few people you can talk to about, like, how do you do this? How do you exit this thing you built?
Can I ask you the first question, which is like, I think a lot of people misuse the word burnout or actually have it, but don't know they have it. When did you first realize that actually the feelings that you had were not maybe right?
You know, it probably started during the pandemic, right? I'm a very social person. I love to coming into office. I loved having all of the engagement with everyone, seeing the creativity of what we're building. And suddenly I was just sitting, for 14, 16 hours in front of a screen every day, no breaks. I remember having to sort of like schedule bio breaks just to be able to run to the restroom. And the rest was just one continuous stream. And I remember, this sounds bad, and for everyone who works at Tradeshift, don't think about it that way, but like I ended up hating looking at that screen. I ended up hating, even seeing at some points the logo, right? And it doesn't mean I don't do the work, and I didn't, believe in the company and didn't want to get home. Like I have so much drive towards that, but there's something really, really wrong when the thing you're supposed to love is actually the thing that you almost like you can't bear thinking about it, right?
When you felt that, did you realize straight away that was happening? Did you realize that it was?
No, it started just like, I don't like this meeting, or this content here is not good, or so, but then you start realizing it's across the board, right? It's like a bit like the frog getting boiled slowly, right? You don't see it when you're in it. And it took sort of some pretty big reality checks, both on my health and on my work, that made me realize, no, you're not in a healthy place, right?
Can I ask, what were those reality checks? I think everyone talks, was there like a moment when you were like, I have to change this?
I think one thing was, I'm just, as I said, going around during COVID and realizing, I'm thinking every day more about what food I'm going to cook tonight, what hike I'm going to do. Like, that sounds innocent, but like at some point my girlfriend, she's like, you like literally only want to talk about things that are not Tradeshift. You don't want to, if I talk about like even for a second, you change topic. You don't want to like meet anyone. You don't want to go out. You're just sitting at home. You either want to play computer games or cook, and you used to be this insanely social person. And, realizing that my whole personality was almost like flipped around was a big part of it. And she kicked my ass also and said like, look, this is not who I saw. She's like, I fell in love with. You're like a different person, right?
Can I ask you, and just like hearing what you say here, you're a very social person. Everyone struggled in COVID.
Yeah.
How did you get over the thought that, it's just COVID, and actually I'll get over it when we get back into the real world?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually, it sounds bad. I think that's almost what broke me, right? Because, the moment then COVID was over, you're like, okay, finally, we can get back. Finally, you have this hope. That's this very famous saying, like, the most dangerous thing in the world is hope, right? Because then you get back and it's not there. The energy is not there the same way, right? And I think at the same time, obviously COVID was an extremely challenging business environment, as you can guess. Also, every unicorn are struggling massively, right? We moved from a world where there was 40, 60x revenue multiples to a world where there's 7x, right?
Bring back 21.
Yeah, and so you have to restructure financing in that environment. You have to go out. All the shareholders who've been loving what you've been doing up until that point really do not like to have those conversations. So it's also, you move from not just from an environment where you think you're going to be back and you're going to be creative, you're going to be fun, but also to an environment where every single conversation you have is just hard-edged. It's tough negotiations, and that's fine. Like, and that's the job. But it's also, I think, at some point, you know, you got to get the job done. I feel like you owe to employees, you owe to actually shareholders, to everyone, that you get the company to the other side. But grit alone don't make you happy. It just get the job done, right? It just get you to the other side. But the cost for me was very, very high of getting to that other side, right?
Do you ever think that your happiness doesn't matter? I was talking to someone yesterday and it was like, it doesn't matter that I am happy. What matters is that the machine of Harry and Harry's brand keeps going, because the money that the machine makes funds so many other things. Funds mothers, brothers, fathers, teams. Who the fuck cares if I'm happy?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking that many times during the spring and this year, honestly, right? And I think, you know, as I also said, right, like in the beginning, when you try to figure out what it means to be a leader, you think, oh yeah, it's about having people follow me. But then you realize, like, you know what, once those people follow you, then you have a real responsibility, because, you know, I mean, it's pensions on the line, mortgages, children. Like, at that point, you make some choices where you say, my happiness is not what's most important. I mean, I made some decisions where I could have gone a different path. I could have gone a very different path and probably, you know, had a very different outcome and been happier. But it would not, it would have been a disaster for the company and for everyone involved. You kind of have to sort of eat that bit of medicine. But I think the flip side of that is, with happiness comes also great work, comes great creativity and so on. So it really depends. I feel like most founders are people who can't quit. And that's both a blessing and a curse. But happiness is not a given.
I do want to get to not quitting, because I think it's a mantra that we all say a lot. But I do just want to ask, when you're feeling these things, we've mentioned the different people involved, do you communicate to them? Do you say to your team, hey, like, I'm actually just struggling with a couple of things right now, so can you give me some space? Can you be more patient with me? Do you communicate your mental position with them?
Yeah, like, there was a very small circle of people in Tradeshift that's been around for 10 years. I told a few of them, I like, look, I am really, really struggling, and I'm trying. But it's also, as the leader, like, you're a symbol in a way, right? You can't go in a town hall in the whole company and say, listen, guys, I'm actually getting severely depressed at doing the work, or like, you know, I'm suffering from burnout and I'm not sure I can go the distance. And
can you not say that?
I mean, maybe you could, maybe I could. I don't know. That's a great question. I chose not to. I chose to say, no, we can get through this, right? Because also I felt like a lot of other people were, of course, struggling, right? Like, you know, we were going from a world of hypergrowth to, you know, margins and profitability, right? Like, the work environment was also changing a lot for everybody in Tradeshift. And we went through layoffs like everybody else, right? Like, you know, to improve profitability and so on. So I think in all of that, if you then stand up as a leader and say, and by the way, I'm also feeling slightly depressed and burned out, I think I might have gotten like an FU from a good chunk of the company, right? So
I know, I do agree with you. I think the other thing that's hard is also the relationships you have personally.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe this is kind of masochistic male, bad kind of feeling that I have, but I feel like I need to be the strong one. Like, I can't go to my mother with MS and be like, oh, I'm struggling with my mental. Like, I have to be the strong one so she knows she can rely on me.
Yeah. No,
Did you feel that?
Absolutely. And I think it is some stupid male ego stuff, probably. Yeah, just ego. It's interesting, right? Because my partner now, she's like, I don't need you to carry me. I don't need you to help me. Like, I'm a strong person. And I think that have made me reset a lot of how I approach this and why I'm doing stuff. And I'm allowed to just do it for myself. I'm allowed to do it because it's fun. I don't have to, you know, carry someone. And I think that's freeing. It's also something I'm really still trying to get used to. But you know what? It's good to get your ego kicked from time to time and try to learn from it.
Never fun getting kicked, but I agree with you in terms of the lessons. So when you have that realization, you then decide you need to make a decision and take action. What happened then?
I knew the transaction had to be done. And I think ultimately then it was down to figuring out how long and when and where to put the focus. And I think, you know, during conversation with the board.
Can you have a conversation with investors and board members about mental health?
No. I mean, brutally honest here, right? Like,
why is that? I'm a board member and
investor. Yeah, no, I think maybe, depends, right? But look, if you think about the type of funds and capital managers and people you deal with at a late stage growth startup, I mean, there's probably as much space to have that mental health conversation as there is on Wall Street in general, which is not a lot, right? And I think, we all agreed that it was best I stepped aside and we made space for the next generation. And I think for me, the most sort of prevalent feeling I had after was just relief. Like, I was so relieved to be able to say, okay, somebody else got this now. Somebody else has the job of driving it further and, getting it to the next stage. And that's what, as hindsight is 2020, right? That's when I really realized, holy shit, I've really, really been in a bad place. Because to feel that immense relief of letting go of something I'd done for 14 years and then not seeing it while you're in it, right? So that's actually what prompted me to write the post. And I was really in doubt, like, do I want to write this, right?
So you come out of the meeting and you just breathe a massive sigh of relief.
Yes.
How did that feel?
Part of me would have, like, there should be this voice telling me that's bad and, you should care more for the people, you should fight some more, but it wasn't there. I was just like, I am so done. Like, this was not just a marathon, it was an ultra marathon times 10. And right now, I can't imagine anything better than I don't have to do this right now. And that's just, both great and in some side incredibly sad, because this is my life, right?
And people often ask the question, like, how do you know when to give up versus when to persist? And I always say it's when you are no longer excited to try anything new with that venture. There's no new projects you want to do. There's no new hires you want to. There's nothing that you're excited to do.
No, and I also think, like, it's like you see the same strategy for the 17th time, and people are like, hey, we have this great idea. It's like, yep, been there. And I realized, like, in the early days of Tradeshift, we always said, like, be critical, not cynical, right? Like, critical is to try to improve an idea and to pressure test it to make it as good as possible. And cynical just means you've given up before you even try. And I realized, like, I'm the cynic in the room, right? Like, I'm the last one who should be the cynic, and I'm the cynic. And at the same time, I was...
Do you think that's normal? Like, I'm the cynic in 20VC. It's, why? It's because I'm fucking weathered. I've been doing this for 9 years. I've seen this shit before. I've lost money.
Yeah. I think it's really, really important that you push yourself to not be the cynic or figure out how not to be the cynic. Because if you don't look at stuff with fresh eyes, like, I thought all of the crypto stuff was absolutely BS. Still think, like, I've done transactions and supply chain infrastructure and payment infrastructure my whole life, right? So I had a little bit of knowledge and background to look at it from. I was like, there's no way this makes sense in any world. But then a few people challenged me, and I challenged myself to say, no, try to look at it as if you wanted to build something in this space. And, like, I was not a big fan of a lot of the community and so on, but I tried, because I don't want to be that cynic and say, okay, this is just BS, right? Ultimately, it was just BS, and I'm happy I didn't build something in the space.
But I contemplated it seriously. Can I see, you come out of the meeting, you were relieved. It's 14 years of your life. You're Christian from Tradeshift.
Yeah.
That's part of your identity,
yeah,
rightly or wrongly. Did you feel a loss of identity with no longer being Tradeshift?
Some. Or put in another way, I think, I might not be active in the company, but I think what I put into that company the last 14 years will still be there. And I think for a lot of the amazing people doing amazing work there, they will also know that. For me personally, did I leave something behind? Probably, but I think, learned so many lessons. Like, I think, look, we were kids. Like, I was joking the other day, I was talking to VCs, like, people are like, oh, SaaS metrics should be this, and this should be your margin and rule of 40 and all of this. Like, are you aware that none of this existed 14 years ago? We were making it up as we went along. It's like, what should be great metrics for a SaaS company? It's like, nobody knows, right? So I think, it's really important to understand that all of those lessons, that today it's just a machine. It's got to be like this. Here's the metrics. Here's the thing you got to hit. All of that. We had to experiment and build and learn. One of the things that excites me today is to say, wow, I can take all that knowledge. I can take all those ideas and I can approach completely from fresh. Right?
Do you know what's funny is, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, the investing team do tell me off this, because all the first-time founders don't come to us anymore. But I always say, like, I would so much rather invest in second-time founders and pay a premium, because I think the lessons that you've learned prevent you from making so many very significant mistakes that first-time founders make just because you don't know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, ultimately, then there's also a chance to make a lot of new mistakes you haven't tried to make before.
Sure. So we've eliminated a world.
But at least I can make them faster and I can learn faster, right? And I think, back to the burnout side, I think it's like, I was also advising on a few things, and I was really getting immersed in everything that was happening in generative AI. I studied as a sociologist with language as a primary, like complex system and language. So everything that was happening in generative AI was piquing my brain a lot. And when you're figuring out every time, like, that once a week you're listening into that team meeting or hearing or seeing what they're building, that's the most exciting moment in what you're doing. And, what you're doing every day is the thing you just got to fight to do. Then I think your energy is also flowing differently. And I think that's also why the idea of being able to sort of have a bit of a blank slate and think differently and build differently and use all of my experience, that's really exciting.
Can I ask you a bit of a weird one? But it's, we're constantly told the mantras of never give up, never ring the bell, persistence is the key to entrepreneurship, the winners are the ones who just stay. I remember Jason Calacanis told me with podcasting, he said, it's very simple. The winner is the one who just survives the longest. Jason, I fucking survived a long time.
Yeah.
But how do you think about that? Persistence, never give up.
I think it's true, unfortunately. I think a big problem over the last 6 to 7 years is we started telling everyone they should become a founder. And at the same time, we didn't tell them what that means. The people I know who persisted, right? Like, the people who, for instance, we joke at like the Danish mafia, the early, Zendesk, Unity, all these guys. None of us are normal people. Like, none of us with extremely unhealthy work balances, right? And so I don't think...
Do you have to have that to be successful?
I don't know. I'll try to see if it can be different this time. Like, I'll try, but I don't know. And I have a feeling once I'm really pulled into the idea, it'll be hard, right?
What do you think we don't tell founders that they should know? Because you're right, it was this normalization of entrepreneurship. Everyone can be a founder, and everyone became a founder.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of things. The first thing is, for 99% of startups, no offense, but VCs is going to own most of your company by the time you have worked for 6 or 7 years, and your salary will probably be less than if you had worked anywhere else combined. And that's if you're lucky, right? Like 99% of chance you just
That's if you're alive after 6 years.
Exactly right. And the second thing is also just like that, as you just said, it's just about surviving, etc. Like, are you willing to really think through what that means on the cost of your family life, your connections, your friends? Like, I'm lucky I have like 2 or 3 people that still talk to me after 14 years, but that's about it. Like, everybody else is like, we used to know you, but like, we don't, right? And
what do you mean by that?
I mean, people outside the company at the time, right? And
just because you lost friendships?
Yeah, and the only friendships I sort of retained over that long time, in the end, happened to be people I was working with.
Do you regret that?
Yeah. I think absolutely, actually.
What would you have done differently? Like, help me, because I feel like, no offense, you're a chapter ahead, and I'm making the mistakes that you...
I don't know, right? It is about, like, it's so weird, right? Because, like, I'm sort of a side story. I used to play a lot of poker. Then my friends is like, why don't you play poker anymore? It's like, well, once you've done a $200 million funding round and you've just stared each other down at that table, and I'm not saying founders sometimes bluff, but sometimes we do, and sometimes we take it home. It's really hard to get excited at sitting at the table and, playing about $100, like, or even if it's more. And so I think our lives become so different. What do you talk about? Like, well, I've been traveling around the world. Like, honestly, like, there were many years I did between 150 and 200,000 miles a year. I was looking at my average. I think I spent around 4 years in hotels over 14 years. You lose, like, in a way, connection with reality. I mean, what are you going to talk about it? But it's like, yeah, this is what happened this week, and we went to work. So I think you got to find ways to find those common threads.
Is your health just in the shitter in those moments? I mean, that travel is just brutal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is probably too much, but like, I almost died of anemia actually, because I just didn't have time to go to the doctor. I felt really fatigued. I felt really tired. And, just before annual sales kickoff, I went to the doctor and said, I feel really fatigued. Like, let's take a blood sample. And we did. And I went off to Las Vegas to do the rah. And, in front of the whole company. I stepped down from stage. There's a text message from my doctor that says, go immediately to the nearest ER and tell them your hemoglobin is 5.4. So I remember I'm sort of in a blur going
So you went back on stage, finished the talk.
I was done with the talk. I delivered the talk. arrive in the ER, tell them, hey, my doctor told me my hemoglobin is 5.4. And she's like, no, it's not, because you'll be laying in a coma on the floor. And then I said no, and I showed a text message. The next thing I knew, I had a bag of blood in my arm, and
Did that sink into you? I mean, that's quite.
No, at the time it didn't. And that's actually really, really sad, right? Because the risk of dying of a heart attack when you have that low hemoglobin is very, very high. And so yeah, you absolutely sacrifice your health over this process. And it's stupid stuff like thinking you don't have time to go to the doctor. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm always tired. I'm a little tired anyway. It's like, what's a little bit more tired means drink, some more Red Bull or some more espressos and so on. So that actually, in one sense, it was a wake up in the sense that I really, really started caring about my health and feeling healthy and being healthy. But I don't think it sunk in why I got to that point. I realized I needed to be healthy, but just so I could perform. I didn't realize that I got so sick because I was so focused, or if you will, obsessed. Yeah.
Did you change anything after that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Started exercising 4 or 5 times a week. Took my health very seriously. Monitored, I would say, my health condition in general, and probably one of the best things that came out of the last 14 years.
I think you look fantastic, by the way. I mean, you're always a good-looking dude, but it's the Scandi blood. Can I ask you, this sounds weird, but there's like this, for my sins, I was also bulimic. And there's like this masochistic tendency, I think, within a lot of addicts, where it's like, you quite like the feeling of being in pain, almost when I'm so tired that I'm almost fucking buzzing.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that where you actually quite liked almost feeling the pain?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, by the way, Harry. I think there was this pride of just being able to, keep going. We used to have a Skype group, and Skype was a thing of a few people in the company that was called Late Night Motherfucking XYZ. And that was because at 2 a.m. we were all sitting, solving some problem, getting something done, getting somewhere, and we were proud that we were in that group, right? And again, that's maybe not the healthiest sign. And so I do think there's something about enjoying that you can do what other people can't, maybe. Like you can be a little bit more tough, you can last a bit longer, you can get more stuff done. I can go straight from a customer meeting and then make a keynote in the car, and I came back at 4 a.m. the night before because I was out with customers. And for most other people, that would just mean that they would be destroyed. But how long can you do it, and what are the consequences of doing it?
As you said about your friendships there, I think one thing that I think intensely about is actually children. I love children. I don't have any because, I struggle to get up in the morning myself. But I would like them one day. And I worry that I won't be there for them in a way that I would like to as a father.
Yeah.
I hope it's okay for me to ask, were you there for your child in the way that you wanted to be? And how do you feel about that?
First off, I would say COVID was the biggest blessing in that regard because, so I have an 8-year-old son, and during COVID, when I was working home, I got to spend 2 really amazing years where, we hung out every day, we built Minecraft, we did a lot of stuff. Because also remember, I was sort of really having a hard time engaging with a lot of the primary stuff. And so this stuff became really, really good. Time will tell. I think I always tried to be honest with my son about what I do and why I do it. I always tried to be honest that I work a lot, but I also tried to include him in what is the work. My son and my girlfriend's daughter, we were on vacation this summer, and we did called it business summer camp, and they both had they made a startup, like a rocket company and a candy shop. And in a way, you have 2 choices if you want to do this and you have kids, right? You can try to shield them and keep them away from it, or you can try to include them so they can see what it is. And again, as I said, time will tell, right? But
do you regret missing things?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots and lots of things I regret missing. I mean, we all have them, right? Parent school meetings, etc. I mean, one of my friends said that being a parent is to permanently feel guilty. Like, that's just how it is. And I mean, to your point about getting up early in the morning, I mean, if you have a problem with that, just get kids, because that solves the problem. So, but I think it ends up costing family time, and it ends up costing, with your family.
This is kind of you weren't expecting the kind of mutual counselling session, but I constantly feel guilty because I constantly feel like I'm failing as a son, as a brother, as a boyfriend, as a fund manager, as an entrepreneur. There's so many different fucking hats that if I'm winning in one, I'm by nature failing in another.
Yeah.
I really struggle with that constant feeling of failure.
I think it's really, really important to learn to forgive yourself. And it's taken me, I'm still struggling with it, but it's taken me a very, very long time to do that.
Is there anything that's helped you do that?
Yeah, I did coaching for 7 years. I had an amazing coach. In the very first session I had with her, I said, look, coaching is bullshit. I don't want you to take my anger away. I'm angry about all the bullshit from my childhood. And it's just like, I want to build and show everyone what I can create. And she just looks at me and she says, Christian, what makes you think that it's not a bigger revenge to be happy and successful? And I was just like, F you. So that was the start. But I think one of the things she taught me is it's okay. Like, it's okay that you're failing at certain things. I also think it's about creating maybe a family life and where you are aligned in what you want. And, you can build together, for instance, this is what I'm doing now. And in that way, it's not a constant tug of force of time, right? And it's more like you're pushing in the same direction. Now, that's very, very hard to find, of course, but that's at least what works for me.
I mean, it is very hard to find. We'll get on to that. I'm just intrigued. You said there about kind of bullshit from childhood. I'll show you.
Yeah.
I was like the fat kid that was bullied at school. I know you wouldn't know it now looking at this hulk of a man. But there was a lot, which is like, I derive my own value from, like, bluntly, my status and how much money I have.
No, of course. And I think you'll have a hard time finding a founder that don't have something that they're motivating them, right? Because as I said earlier, like, founders are extreme people.
What is it for you? Is it that bullshit childhood that you're like, I'm going to...
It was that. And I think over the last 7 years, it moved from being that to being...
Is that unhealthy? Like, because I don't mind.
No, I mean, I used to also don't mind, but I think I also learned that I also don't mind actually being happy. Did a bit of the edge go off? I think you should ask my competitors about that. They'll probably say no. And that's the thing. I think inside your head, you think it's really, really important and it's what drives you. But what I found is, like, even when it goes down a little bit and you feel less of the anger, less of the motivation from that, I didn't lose my drive. One thing you might be depriving yourself of is figuring out that you have the drive because you have the drive, and it's not necessarily with something external. And I mean, that's awesome. That just means you're a creative driven person with a high amount of willpower, right? Yeah. So you don't need to let somebody else who was, a dick in your childhood define you, right? Like, they're just, yeah.
No, I definitely agree with you there. Can I ask, it's also a financial decision walking away. And I think a lot of people don't admit the truth about finances. Like, we all have to have these missions. It's not about the money. Yeah. Oh, I don't care about the money. I just love my mission.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're doing a direct-to-consumer bottle company.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So my point being, like, how do you feel about your relationship to money today? And did that change?
So for me, money has never been the goal. It's kind of weird. Like, I always just been a very curious person. Like, I actually didn't really I always just stumbled into things that sort of piqued my curiosity, and then I started digging more at them. And what I found is that if I follow my curiosity, it tends to follow that, success and money and so on. But I think also in my later years, right, like, it's easier when you don't have any kids and it's just you, Like, what is risk really then? Like, risk is just all the investors and, especially when they want to extract a bit better terms or, bully you in a down market or whatever, right? They will tell you, like, oh, we would lose you. We'd hate to see you lose everything, right? But the reality is, my everything is my mind, right? They can lose some money, but I cannot lose my mind. I can still, tomorrow go out and think about what's next. And so I think for me, money is later in life, now that I have a family and people, like, of course it's important that you can support everyone, but it's never been the goal. It's really nice. Like, people who say money can't buy happiness haven't tried. You can definitely make things nicer and you can make life nicer. But I think it gets very hard to sustain that drive if it's the only thing. There got to be something you want to scratch at, a peek at, or that tickles your mind enough that you want to keep going.
Can I see, you mentioned that there's two sides to this, but you said it's like an ultra marathon in the last 14 years, or many ultra marathons. I totally get you and understand that. My question to you is on two sides. If we start about kind of investors on the, negotiating and discussing terms with you, what are the bullshit things that you see about VCs, investors, that you think more founders should know or wish you'd known earlier?
First off, overall, Tradeshift has been lucky to have an extremely great group of investors around the company the whole way through. I think one of the things that we were lucky early on is that we have a lot of investors that were actually, in their way, they were thinking evergreen. They did not have to have necessarily an exit in 3, 4, 5 years, especially because we, as when we talked 9 years ago, massively underestimated how hard it would be, how long it would take.
Like, I think one of the biggest for me is like there is misalignments between founders and VCs. I need my cash back, and I need more of it back than I gave you. And there will be times when I need it back and it doesn't suit you.
Yeah, of course. But I also think VCs get pissed off when founders use exactly the same strategies as they do. Right, and I'll take an example. Right, in the latest financing round for Tradeshift, I refused to sign the papers until the employee stock option pool got moved from common to Pref 2, because I did not want all of our employees to be underwater in any potential transaction in the future, and that did not include founder stock. I knew. And you know, this is the thing where people understand waterfalls, they understand the games, they understand the league prefs, they understand how everything flows. Probably not win me the most friends in the world at that time. And I did wait quite late because I knew if I was bringing it up, 9 months before, it would be hard. But when the transaction is about to happen,
it's too late. They've put too much time in.
Exactly right. And this is the other thing, right? Like Runway works both ways, right? I mean, Runway is an excellent tool. To make sure you also are able to have some leverage in that negotiation, because the reality is if your company is doing well and if you're great and if the runway is shorter, then everybody needs to come to a conclusion faster, and that can work both for the founder and for the VC. So VCs are not your friends, but the best VCs can help you get a much better outcome. And I think one of my regrets, I said we have a good group of investors around Tradeshift, but I think early on we were too focused on valuation, and we could probably have made some other choices then and spend a lot of time.
What would you have done differently?
Probably taking some lower valuations and not having to fight as hard to catch up to those numbers, to be honest. But
so let's just dig into that. So you took higher valuations and then you felt a pressure to then catch up to them.
Yeah, I think it's a very classic trap.
Did you do things that you wouldn't have done otherwise?
I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, and this is as I said, 14 years ago, we raised our A round at $100 million valuation. We did our B round 140, C at 350, right? So these were hefty numbers 14 years ago. We could, because we had a strong vision and a strong product and strong customers, but it also meant that when real SaaS metrics started emerging and the market started normalizing, and then it was really, really tough, right? Because we had to catch up to that, and we had to do some creative structuring of financing in the interim, because you couldn't go out and raise necessarily the same market, or you would be forced into a down round and so on. So I think I got like a PhD in finance as well in the last 14 years.
But
right?
I actually tweeted yesterday, how many very, very successful companies today raised 100x ARR rounds. So $1 million in revenue, 100 million price. And Parker Conrad from Rippling, I know and has been a guest on the show many times. He was basically like, this is a narrative that VCs like to spin. Actually having the capital allows you to do different experiments, which is good. It's unrelated to valuation. I think he's wrong. And I think he's wrong because it's like, he's very good at deploying capital efficiently.
Yeah.
But 99% of people, if given 100 million, are not.
You're both right. I think he's right in the sense that you do need, and in fact, our argument for raising at those valuations were, nobody has done this before. Nobody has built a global network for trade just like you built a Facebook. Like, it didn't exist. And we have to be honest, we have no freaking clue how to do it. We have a lot of ideas, but we need to iterate. So my argument was always, if we get more capital, we have more shots and we can try more times, right? And also, I kind of always dislike the whole, you should pick us as a VC. We know it's a 40% discount to the other guys, but we are smart. Like the smart VC story. Because the reality is, like, if I need to give us 40% discount because the VC is so smart that they will make up for in value, like, then I probably shouldn't be the founder. Right? The VC should probably be the founder. And
on the flip side, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah,
and I know you
as an investor.
Yeah, I'm an immediate entrepreneur for this. It's amazing when you're going on a date and you're like, you know what? This time I'm an entrepreneur.
That's a business card you can flip.
Yeah, if it's an expensive restaurant, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly.
But my question is, I get you on the discount, but actually there are some investors, say a Bill Gurley at Benchmark or Roloff at Sequoia, who the weight of their name, their contacts, and their B2B customers actually could move, and it doesn't take away from your operator ability, but their ability to accelerate you is very significant. Is it worth it then?
I agree. I agree it is. You just got to be sure that when you get that name, you also get that attention. Right? Because you're right. If that brand is behind you, but then also give you the attention to push, then absolutely right. And I think with this other thing that we're working on, we picked some people who come with an extremely good name, but it's a new fund. So that way, I know that there's the full attention behind. You got to be a bit careful with the big names. I mean, they're really, really great, and I know a lot of people there. I think they're amazing, but what you're going to ensure is you have the attention for the right people, and then what you said will happen.
Did you manage your investors well? No one teaches founders investor management, do they?
I think for every investor I have to listen to this, they said we'd probably like a bit more shareholder updates and a bit more. It's hard when you feel like you're just running from, for the first 7-8 years, it's just up and hyper growth. And then you are in turbulent waters and you're just running from fire to fire to fire. That's hard. Sometimes I was writing an update, and by the time I was done writing the update, everything had changed. And you're like, how do you keep catching up? But for the last parts of this process, we had to have a really tight coordination between the shareholders to pull it off. And we did that by having very frequent calls and trying to explain everything, what's going on to everyone. I would like to think in a future life I could do better.
If you could advise founders, we have, 700,000 people that listen. I think 200,000 are founders. If you could advise founders listening on what you know now about fundraising, venture rounds, what would you say that you wish they'd known, you'd known?
Yeah, I think the first one is don't over-optimize on valuation. Its current market's also pretty easy advice. I think the second one is fundraising is, and nobody will admit it's a game. Don't reveal all your cards up front. I used to always take out 1 or 2 slides of the deck. I'll make the perfect pitch deck and then I'll remove the team slide. All VCs will then ask the question, but what about team? And that's the question I want them to ask, instead of asking some stupid question about architecture that they don't know about anyways, and they just want to sound smart. Because you got to remember, VCs will always want to have a question that make them sound smart. So it's much better they ask about something you have in full control over, and they'll say, "Oh, team," and then I'll show this kick-ass team that done it 3 times before, and everybody was very senior and so on. Remember, it's a little bit of a game, and make sure that you control the conversation a bit of where, do you want to go, and then lastly, I think. Remember, you're building relationships for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Just min-max negotiating on the very first contact. If you're about to do something together, that might be very suboptimal for the whole length, right?
Can I ask you, we've opened up, I've opened up a little bit about my struggles before in different areas. As an investor, I would like to be able to have a relationship with you as a founder, if we were investing, working together, where you could tell me.
Yeah.
And I would like to be able to tell you when I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Is there anything that one could do, or is it just the nature of the structure?
No, I think, I have investors where I have this relationship with, right? A bunch of our investors also wrote me after my post. Some were happy with the results of the round, we just did. Some were unhappy, but they still wrote me. And so that meant a lot. But it is clear, right? Of course, investors are in it for the money, and so to some degree, most degrees, I think founders are as well, but it's better when there's an understanding. And there's the old saying, if an investor is good if they show up when shit is hard, right? Everybody is just cheering when it's up, up, up. It's go faster. But the investors that I have a relationship with today are the investors that were there when stuff was really, really hard, or when something blew up in a way we didn't expect or whatever. And they were still there. As an investor, you probably have some control in the sense that you show up for your founders when everybody else is about to bail on them, for instance, right?
Can I be honest? I don't think they come to you. And I don't think they come to you because I just don't feel they can.
No, that's clear.
And so then I think, well, is there anything that I can do to let them know that they can? It's why I do shows more like this, where I show that, I've got problems.
Yeah. No, and I think actually this is part of, that used to be part of the leadership principles in Tradeshift. Which one of the very first things I taught all our leaders is show vulnerability. And the reason I say that is, in American business culture, you just got to be perfect. It's hey, what do you think about this? You have an answer, right? And actually, that's why ChatGPT is kind of screwed, because it just want to give a perfect answer to everything, and it can't say, hey, could you clarify? I don't know, or whatever. So I told my leaders that no, people will actually trust you more if you show vulnerability. If you say, hey, this is an area I'm bad at as a leader, this is an area I'm good at. Because that help build a relationship with people. And I think the same is true as an investor. I think it's absolutely the right strategy to show vulnerability and say, look, I've struggled with these things and so on, because it makes you a human. And I'd much rather work with a human than, somebody who's just...
Can I be really harsh? Yeah. Transparency is the core trait.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you didn't share it with the team when you were struggling.
No, that's spot on. I failed at the first leadership principle I taught most of our leaders. That's right. And maybe they'd gone differently if I had. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think to try to be real people is very, very important. And I think vulnerability is actually one of the biggest trust building things you can do. Now, the hard part is, I've also plenty of times shown vulnerability and gotten screwed over hard, right?
How so?
Just because people take advantage. They see an opportunity, they see money. And then it's really hard the morning after to wake up and say, I don't want to become a fucking cynic. I'd rather have one more time where you say, okay, I was vulnerable and I got effed, but it was more important that I don't lose who I am. Now, people around me will probably say, yeah, that's true, Christian, but you could be a bit more, you could still be a bit more skeptical and a little bit more critical of people and yeah.
When your trust is broken in someone you believe in or trust, it's very hard not to be jaded.
It is. It is the hardest thing in the world. But if you let yourself become jaded, then you let those people define who you are.
Someone once said to me, revenge is someone else having rent in your mind.
Yeah.
And
it's hard. I mean, I say it's like it's easy to just do this, right? It is really, really effing hard.
Yeah. I have people who shit on me on Twitter and they're like, I've been thinking and you're this and you're this and you're this. And I go, you know how much I've been thinking about you?
Yeah. Not at all.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Can I also I said there as like an investor, I want to have that relationship with you where you can. As a founder with employees, with team members, how do you think about creating, especially with new companies now and just generally today with this workforce, about creating environments where hey, mental health is serious and you can talk about it to us? Because you can and you can't.
Yeah, no, I mean, talking about mental health in startups is, wow, that's a big one.
It's a big one because it's binary. Sorry, I'm just...
Yeah, no.
You have some which are fucking crush it.
Yeah, I mean,
and then you have
hustle culture and,
But then you have others where it's let's do gratitude journaling at 11 a.m. and then let's have matcha at 12 and then yoga
Yeah,
at
I'd
1.
rather go to the dentist.
Yeah, but so there's not much of an in-between, I find.
No, and I think it's hard, right? Because even the people, I believe myself, I have the hustle culture. I don't stop. I can just keep going, all of those things, right? When I was younger, I thought okay, how do we deal with mental health in startup? We just make sure we hire people only like that, right? Nobody needs, the first joke was we don't need an HR department because everybody here is just here to work and, fuck it, we'll just go full speed. But I think if I can struggle, then anyone can. And if I can burn out, then anyone can. And I think startups is 99% people. That is the primary asset. And if the wrong person goes down at the wrong time, that can be a very, very big destruction of value, right? So I think we got to find better ways of thinking about it and navigating around it. It should definitely not be that we now have to all do our journaling and a lot of other woke things that I think probably just contribute more to stress than that actually helps solve things. So I don't know. Maybe it is having people you can talk to at work. Maybe it is.
Do you find leadership harder today in this woke generation?
I think a lot of the things that, were the sources behind wokeness probably have grounding. I think it's extremely hard to discuss that within some very extreme environments like startups because they are extreme machines, they are extreme environments. On the other hand, there's also been a lot of founders out there that is exploiting that and said, look, it is an extreme environment, so I can do whatever I want. I can be, psychological terror or whatever, right? So I don't know where to draw the line. It's incredibly hard. I personally think that you got to create an inclusive environment without going overboard, and then you're just going to focus everyone on one thing and one thing only, and that's building. And I like what David Heimer says. He banned politics and in signals, and I think that's absolutely right. I think we shouldn't sit around the table discussing all this stuff. We should just build something and make it work. And if we're allowing everyone to be the best at building, then we're doing it right.
Should you be friends with your team?
One of the things we put into what we're building right now is that we're a team, not a family. Because let's be real, I think some of the hardest things I've had to do. I fired a person that I've known since high school. I worked with for 10 years, who moved to California as part of the journey. At that moment, you really do not want to be friends with the person, the people you work with. On the other hand, I think it's very, very hard to do something as intense and wild and crazy as a startup without becoming friends with these people, because you have all these war stories, you have everything you do together. So one of my good friends and early advisors, he always said, look, absolutely go work with your friends or become friends with who you work with. Just know like you might have 9 really good years or 5, and then the breakup is probably horrible. But why not have 5 really intense good years with someone when most friendships, to be honest, is like we meet in the pub and we talk bullshit about the game. It's a trade-off, and I don't have the answer.
Can I ask you, 14 years, we mentioned there kind of the lessons from investors and board. When it comes to like operational lessons, what are the biggest operational lessons that stand out to you from the 14 years that you advise founders now, having seen what you've seen?
First off, never ever compromise on quality when you hire. Like you will be so tempted when you're in the hypergrowth stage, because everybody will be screaming at you that they need people on this function or this function or this function. And I think,
do you think you can have like A+ players in every role? It's
just essentially a question of pain. Like, how much pain are you willing to endure to get the right people on the team? Because when everything is scaling like crazy, if you don't fill that role, it means everybody else is in more pain. But on the other hand, if you start filling those roles with people who are not the same level of quality, then you have a challenge, right?
Or things just don't get done.
Yeah, no, but and I mean,
more pain like I can take.
yeah, but I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, it's a very real example. It's like at one point we fired 50% of the VPs in Tradeshift, and there was no drop of productivity. And I really thought to myself, like, what the fuck have we been doing? Who the fuck are all these people, right? And I mean, that's real. Like, so operational lessons is that. I think the other one is just, I mean, this is said so many times, whatever you charge, double your price. We found out in Tradeshift very early on that there was an inverse relationship between price and speed of sales cycle. The more we charged, the faster we closed. People are afraid of that. People are afraid of saying really large numbers, especially if you come from outside this world. I think another operational lesson that is really, really important is just, and this sounds really like wild, but it's like you just gotta iterate faster, and you gotta kill stuff faster. You're gonna kill. Everybody thinks that they can kill stuff fast, but it's not fast enough. And I think the very best operators, like you mentioned Parker Conrad and people like that, they are so insane at the iteration speed, and that's why they win. This time, the company that I've been working with is like they're 6 months in. They already have first Fortune 500 customers, product. They are scaling the team. They have pipeline. If I think back in Tradeshift, that took a year and a half, right? Now that same thing has been done in 6 months. I think there's an ability to understand, and I think in Europe, we don't really still understand. I was 10 years in Silicon Valley. I don't think we still understand how, I'll be blunt, much better that most really good San Francisco startups or Silicon Valley startups are compared to the Europeans.
Why is that? I agree.
We just honestly like vacation a little bit too much. We like coming home at 5 with the kids. Like, we're starting to have other things that are other benefits, right? Because, I mean, like, look, the very best people in the world in say AI or engineering or whatever, they want life quality, right? So Europe can offer a lot on that, but the extremity of execution is something I only ever seen in Silicon Valley. Actually, one other place is China.
What are some examples of the extremity of execution that impressed you or think we could learn from?
I remember, when I first came to Silicon Valley, it was Reid Hoffman who actually told me, he said, like, within 2 square miles of where you stand, there's 5,000 startups. Within 3 months, 95% of them are going to be dead. Everybody there are going to be into new startups, recycling all the knowledge, etc. Right? So you have, just to start with, the whole machine recycles knowledge much faster. But the second thing I think within those startups is shit just get done. Nobody stops until they're done. Like, I mean, the idea that you work or don't work on weekends, or like, it's just not a thing. And if you're doing a startup and it's early stage, you just work, you just build, you just do. And I mean, I know it's ironically to sit and praise that right here as we started the conversation on burnout. And I think that's probably the paradox. There is no good ways to combine all of these things.
I do believe if you have to create something, if you want to create something truly like category defining, you do have to give up a huge amount that no one else is willing to give up, or very few people are willing to give up.
They're absolutely right. Yeah.
And it's like, you don't build greatness on 9 to 5.
Yeah. No, but I also think like just look broader, right? Like I mean, Tradeshift, we deployed our software into shared service centers all around the world. Like we operate in 100 countries, like supply chains in 100 countries, but also in sort of a little bit of a segue into some of the stuff that we're doing now is what I realize is this is not startup life, right? But that's just general corporate life. Is most modern work sucks, right? I mean, why do people go to startups? Because it's exciting, because it's great, because it's fun, because you're doing something with your mind. If you go to most sort of corporate work, 90% of it is like copy something from this page of this spreadsheet into this field, type this form, click this button, you have no idea what it does, then update this and then keep going. It's so far removed from who we are as humans and we are animals. We get a kick out of defending the village, hunting for stuff, raising children. Like it's very hard to get excited about clicking update lead source 4.
Catch per CD4.
Exactly right. And I think so with this new thing, like with Beyond Work, one of the things that I've really been thinking hard about is, which goes back to also how I felt a little bit, is can we try to redefine the modern work experience? Can we make it so it's not the applications that define how you work? Why should it be Salesforce or Workday or SAP, all these systems that make you into a robot? Why shouldn't it be you who can just work the way that your brain works, and all these systems should be in the background?
So what is Beyond Work, sorry?
Yeah, so Beyond Work is...
That sounds great, but like...
Beyond Work is essentially the idea that we should be able to automate any work we want as regular people. And we should be able to take any task and combine it and collaborate with other people around it without having to log into applications. Imagine you have a problem, say, hey, I want to create a vendor database based off all these invoices. Then the user interface just appears and show you that, and then it goes away. So
it's like a meta layer that sits on top of all your existing apps, plugs into all data sources.
Exactly right, but it's centered on humans in the center. Salesforce don't have a human in the center. Salesforce makes you into a robot that has to click buttons in a certain order. And why on earth should you learn that? Like, why should you spend 10% of your brain storing information that's completely useless for anything you do? What you really want to be doing is to look at that data and, pull out conclusions or figure out like who's our top 10% salespeople. And we have some amazing, powerful tools right now, like, of course, the new large language models, but they don't really solve the problem of work. They just give us some power. They give us some stuff we can do in an engine, but what I've really been thinking about is how can we put all of this together in a new way? How can we generate a completely new work experience? And the funny thing is, I took it out to a few of my friends who are like C-level executives in some of the largest companies in the world. They were like, holy shit, how fast can we get this? Because I think we've forgotten, just some simple numbers, right? IT corporate budgets, they went from $300 billion to $780 billion in enterprise software over the last 10 years. At the same time, we doubled the amount of people in shared services, 8 to 16 million, and we doubled the amount of people in corporate IT, 4 to 8 million. Why? We're buying all of this amazing software that should make everything better and more efficient and more productive, but instead we just become less efficient and we hate our life more.
Do you not find this? I find this with like company fundraising, so which is like, hang on a minute, in a world of open source, insane tooling, product-led growth, cheap tooling, we need more money to build startups that are often quite lightweight and SaaS tools. We should need less than ever.
Absolutely right. And I think that's actually where, one of the reasons also I got so fascinated is like, to me, building a startup today that is AI first is as pivotal or revolutionary as it were 14 years ago to build the first cloud companies. So I think, and I'm not talking about ChatGPT here and all that. That's amazing, and they're probably going to invent either superhuman intelligence and we're all going to die according to Elon Musk, or it's going to be totally fine and they're going to be almost as good as self-driving cars, but they're going to fail some of the time, right? But what I'm talking about is what are the companies built on this architecture going to look like? And 14 years ago, there came something completely new, cloud computing, and suddenly we could make software in a whole different way from on-prem and change the world. It changed the enterprise world. And I think today, there's a new generation of startups that's going to come over the next 5-10 years, and they're going to be built on an AI-first architecture. And what I personally find exciting is nobody have an idea what that look like yet. Nobody.
I think there's a big difference though. And the big difference is who are the winners in cloud? Winners in cloud are Google. Winners in cloud are Amazon. Winners in cloud are Microsoft. Who were the winners before? Google, Amazon, Microsoft. Here, we have such a strong incumbent set that we have never had before. Everyone's like, oh, compared to mobile. What? Motorola?
Yeah.
Like Nokia? This is a fundamentally different world.
I think you are right when you talk about consumer. And I think, by the way, everybody will make a big mistake if they count Apple out of the AI race. They're going to come with 100 miles an hour, and when they come in, it will be really, really good. But if you think about those winners, what they really provided was platforms. We went from having 1,000 to 35,000 SaaS companies in 10 years, right? I mean, if you look at the explosion of unicorns, for instance, a very good chunk of them were SaaS companies, right? Because enterprise is a multi-polar world. It's not winner takes all. I mean, Peter Thiel's power laws works really well in consumer, but in enterprise, there's so many modes. I mean, compliance, regulatory, incompetence. Like, there's just layers of stuff that makes decisions happen differently. And I think the other thing is, if you look at the next generation of stuff about these modes, if you asked me last year, I'd say somebody like OpenAI is going to be like the AWS of AI. But 9 months later, I was running on my laptop a model that was as powerful as ChatGPT 3.5 that was released as open source by Facebook. So I've never in my life in computing seen something that moves this fast. And you know what's really, really exciting? I mean, I've done this my whole life. I have no clue how this is going to turn out. I don't know if the incumbent's going to win or somebody else. I don't care. I just want to build something that's valuable for people. But I think it's really exciting that we don't yet know how it's going to play out.
Do you think, one thing I've been thinking a lot about actually is like, does it actually remove the importance of user interfaces?
Completely. I mean, user interface, okay, I'm going to say something that's blunt. User interfaces are stupid. It's only because we only had that metaphor, right? We create screens with buttons. And I mean, every year, every enterprise vendor is forced to come up with more screens with more buttons. Why? They sell user licenses by the seat. Guess what? Is there incentive to make the application more complex or less complex, right? They only go one way. So why would you need that if you can just say, hey, I'm going to take 2 weeks of vacation. Could you please update the company record? Or if you could say, I would like to generate a vendor database based on this folder, Google Drive folder I just threw at you with invoices. Natural language, of course, is far more efficient, but we can't just do prompt. We can't just everybody said, well, you can do anything you want with ChatGPT. Well, I mean, 99% of people use it as Wikipedia, and that's it. Right. So we need more. We need the ability to, be able to push buttons. But we need to have a completely different experience. When mobile came, it took 5 years before we really started having the concepts of responsive mobile web design, user interfaces emerge. And I think we're seeing the same right now. There will be a new generation of user interfaces that haven't fully been invented yet. But we will look at all of the screens of the applications we use every day as dinosaurs in less than 3 years. We're like, holy shit, why were we sitting with thousands of buttons and thousands of screens?
It's very. I had Miles Grimshaw on from Benchmark. It actually came out today, and he said, the future of AI is essentially selling the work and not the software.
Completely.
You
work.
You agree with that?
Yeah, and that's why we named the company Beyond Work. and I think the point is your HR system. That's the head of HR that buys that. It's not you as a worker who sits every day. Same for the EP system, same for any system. Whoever made a set of tools, a platform for you as a worker. It's like, I mean, if you're a forester and you're cutting down trees, you would have a chainsaw as your daily tool, right? But all these systems has been made by somebody else who's charging by the license, by the user, bought by people who don't use it. And then we wonder why the people who sit in the middle, they're miserable. And I think, by the way, demographic...
Is that not the rise of product-led growth, though? This is a phenomenon that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, where a user gets their credit card out, they sit in Tradeshift, and they can buy a single license and go.
Yeah. I mean, product-led growth is definitely one way, I think, and that helps. That just means you need to make your product good enough that people find value organically. I think that's super healthy, and I think that's much healthier than the sort of SaaS revenues of classic enterprise content software. Sorry to the people I saw for the last 14 years. But I do think the world is changing. I think we're going to absolutely move to consumption-based pricing. It's the only way. I think it's going to be very hard to hold the moat on recurring revenue as it is today. Because customers will want to see more value, and they'll want to see a more soft ramp up to that value. But I also think on the work piece that, look at the demographic problem. Like, most of the people I talk to, even if they wanted to replace the workers they have in their shared service centers today one-to-one, they can't. Because that generation of young people, they don't want to go in and sit in front of a computer and type formulas into Workday every day. So we got to completely change the work experience in next 5 to 10 years. So we're going to run out of people to do the work.
I agree with you totally. I guess my question is, we're seeing more capital rush into the space than ever before. I honestly, right now, I think 95% of all new companies we see are AI-related companies, which I've never ever seen in a rush before. Is 99% of venture dollars going in today going to be lit on fire?
Most likely. I think we are right now, both 99% of the money going in is going to be lit on fire, and two, we are underestimating the impact of AI. And I think both are true at the same time. But I think we got to get at least 1 or 2 cycles in to start really seeing what's happening.
Okay, number one, do we need to burn the money on AI to see the development, to see
Most likely. We need to do the experiments. But I think the other thing is, like, in Beyond Work, we banned talking or using AI as something we talk about. Like, AI is essentially as interesting as saying database, or, we have a HTML rendering layer or whatever. It's a set of technologies. And I think what is really, really important, and I think most people right now that are rushing into, as you said, AI is missing, I think it's about the user experience. I think it's about trust. And trust, by the way, is a user experience. It's a design exercise. Everybody's like, we got to have AI stop hallucinating. Well, hallucinations, the more powerful the model, the more powerful the hallucinations. Maybe it's more about showing why and when.
Sorry, I'm just intrigued. You said that trust is a design experience. What did you mean by that?
I mean that for us to really, truly trust AI in the work environment, we need to have cues and we need to feel we can trust them as co-workers. I think that is absolutely a user experience that needs to be designed. Like, if you drive a Tesla that's self-driving, it renders everything that's on the road, right? You don't have to. I mean, it's driving. It don't need to show you. So why is it showing you?
Trust.
Trust, right? What would it mean? Right now, if you ask ChatGPT a question, you say, hey, who won Second World War? They'll give you a prompt. But what if it said, could you please clarify, do you mean in this context or from literature or whatever, right? In fact, some of the things we've been playing around with is, we call it, if in doubt, ask. We sometimes ask when we already know the answer.
Apply that to marriage.
Definitely apply that to marriage.
No,
yeah.
I totally get you there. My question to you is that you said there about kind of changing the worker experience. Dude, I'm in Series B, Series C companies that are flying, and great, fantastic. But they're looking at replacing people with AI tools, whether it's in graphics, design, you name it. And the team know they're looking at being replaced, and they're pushing against it. You're getting this internal resistance from employees knowing that this is coming.
I think humans are incredibly important in the AI loop. And I know I'm giving the spiel that everyone who's in AI right now is, but I want to explain why. Everybody who's pushing for AGI level AI right now, they're going to be sorely disappointed. I think it's an asymptotic curve, and I think we're going to end up with Waymo style cars, meaning you almost have a lawyer, but not quite. And the 5% you don't quite have, it's going to be really, really bad. So I'm not sure there's a big market for almost lawyers or almost designers or almost whatever. But I think what's very interesting is all the trivial stuff we do every day. All the trivial stuff, like, as you said, even in VC, right? You have to, get these documents over here, and then you have to correlate, and you want to run an IR report.
Like cap tables. I mean, what bullshit. Like, if you can actually...
Yeah, so the point is, if we can automate all the trivial stuff that still requires knowledge, that's actually where the sweet spot of capabilities and models are, and we don't need AGI to get there. And then the second piece, back to the human piece, which is, I think people ignoring the obvious. Just have humans in the loop to validate it. Just have humans in the loop to look at. You don't have to go and find all the information. You don't have to go search and obscure and click on really bad buttons in some UI you didn't even understand to get your job done. The AI can do all of that for you, pull all the information, correlate it, and then you can validate. You can use your brain for what you're good at. So I think it's more about, when I say changing the work experience, it's actually about putting the human brain in the place in the loop where it's the very best, and stop trying to make humans into robots.
I get you totally. Can I ask you one question? Where you said about kind of underestimating the impact it has on society. I think we're overestimating the time that it will take to permeate into society. Dude, we're both in Europe, we're in London. Most corporates in London and Europe don't really know what Slack is. They are so far behind. I think we are overestimating the speed of adoption with which we think large corporates will adopt AI.
I saw a pilot recently where we went from, in 60 days, trialing to the enterprise going, we want this deployed to 3,000 people. It's because the guardrails around the trust side and the human validation loops are so strong that essentially they say there's no downside, because we have humans validating at everything. Back to the impact on society and the timeline to it, I think As I said, it's almost like we always underestimate the future in the long run and overestimate in the short run. Like if I see another agent demo on Twitter, I'm just gonna I cannot see any more of the hype demos of AI. And anyone who's building real stuff have to do enterprise grade stuff, etc. Like we know how many problems there are that needs to be solved, right? I think still when I'm seeing stuff like I made a game with my son in a weekend in a programming language I never programmed in. That's real. Like that's real world stuff. That is not overestimating anything in the future that happened. I would not have been able to do that last year, same time. So in less than 12 months. And so I think what we also see is the cost of innovation will drop rapidly. Will it go to zero? Probably not. But it'll be much more about execution and ideas and necessarily having the best coders. And I mean, a good friend who is a programmer his whole life, he said to me, look, there's going to be a whole different generation of coders. I'm a very shitty programmer because I don't have patience, right? So I thought when I learned programming, it's like, this is going to be fun. I'm just going to create things with my mind and, whatever. And then you learn programming is 90% debugging, and I hate debugging with such a passion. But now I just throw my code at ChatGPT and say, hey, where's the problem? Right? So I do think it will impact society massively, but in ways we can't really predict yet, even in the short term.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Miles Grimshaw said about kind of the generation of AI-first engineers, and that very much being front and center. Can I just ask, on the Copilot, I'm seeing Copilot for everything. For your medical assistant, for your lawyer, for your insurance broker. I mean, just awful. And again,
so Copilots are the last breath from the existing enterprise applications to remain relevant.
But they're startups.
But that's even worse. Like, I mean, who wants a co-pilot? I want to be a pilot. And I want to have a pilot. Like, I don't want to have a co-pilot. I don't want to be inside an application. I don't care how many co-pilots you have. The problem is not to have an AI help you navigate an application that's shit. The better solution is to remove the application that's shit and just talk straight with AI. And I think the co-pilot metaphor, right? I mean, what happens when we have 10,000 Clippies all just talking to each other? And for you to work, you have to go and work in all of these Clippies, and you're going to have to tell Clippy A to go talk to Clippy B about that thing you have over in Clippy C. It's going to be, it's going to be worse than it is now.
I remember when I was 4 and at school we'd have, literally it was so exciting at the time, the paperclip thing. It's like, can I help you?
Yeah, Clippy, yeah.
But it's kind of like that.
Yeah, but just imagine 1,000 of them. And none of them kind of completely understand each other. And, so I don't think that's a model for the future. I think it's one of those weird things that happens when we transition from one paradigm to the next one.
Is Copilot a necessary integratory or kind of intersection to do data acquisition well, to allow to be pilot?
I think it is a necessary step for anyone who tries to still make enterprise applications to remain relevant. It's going to be really, even the idea of an application is going to be challenged quite hard, right? If you can just tell your phone that you want to buy, 2 tickets to go to Barcelona, and by the way, book this hotel, and by the way, can you play this music? Why did you need to know about Spotify, Booking.com, all of this? Why do you need to know about any of this?
So will we see the removal of brand?
I think actually that one of the biggest impacts of AI and LLMs is that most application-based brands are going to be really struggling because the brand is the UX. If you're not actually touching the button. So why are they making copilots? They're making copilots because they need you into it. In fact, everybody's talking about the big problem Google have in search with AI and their revenue stream. Nobody's talking about what it means for enterprise applications. I'm so sorry, but Salesforce is just a database. And LLMs are really good at talking with databases and querying data. You don't need 15 layers between you and that database to do it. And so I think that's where the real challenges are going to come, and they're going to be, it's going to be fun to watch.
Does that mean new distribution channels? I think about this a lot, which is like if we remove ourselves from the UI, well, no longer is the newsfeed a worthwhile or a valuable place to be as a brand. Does this enable new distribution channels entirely?
We were talking about it the other day. I think it's almost like the idea of an app almost becomes like TikTok. It's like, here's the flavor of the second. Have you tried this thing? Somebody made this really good prompt that generate this fun thing or whatever. So I think in consumer, it is going to be absolutely pandemonium. And to try to build a consumer tech brand and hold on to any population of users is going to be very, very, very hard in a world where innovation is almost free and LLMs can make anything. In enterprise, again, I said it's going to be different because there's so many moats, there's so many layers of complexity, regulation, etc., that there's still a lot of space. And then the last bit is the biggest differentiator in the world to come is going to be proprietary data. I'm sorry, but with a few exceptions, right? OpenAI, Bard, all of these are trained on the same data set. It's the public data. Okay, Google have a bit more proprietary data on where you are and your travel and email. Meta has some other stuff and so on. But it's all the same consumer world.
Are they actually trained on the same data? When you actually speak to those engineers, they're super happy to tell you about their models, super happy to tell you about the models. The minute you go to like underlying data, sorry, that's not something we discuss.
Yeah, no, and I think obviously because people are afraid of the copyright issues, I think the copyright issues are trending in a direction where I don't think it's going to be a major problem. I mean, fair use, I think, is covering this fairly well. But look, it doesn't matter if you have 10% different data if you train on 1 trillion parameters. It doesn't matter because it's such a big data set that actually is such a small rounding error in what you get out on the other side. But what matters is if you have 15 years of proprietary data on how to manufacture certain enzymes or biology, or if, because that's the stuff.
But I actually think, I always say like no man's land is always the place where you don't want to be. Mm-hmm. I think now no man's land on data ownership is the place where you do want to be, because if you're a startup, you have no data. Of course. And so you're kind of fucked in that way. But if you're an incumbent, you have loads of data, but you also have huge amounts of compliance, incumbent slowness. Tradeshift of the world, private company, 15 years of data, you name any of your companies in that spectrum.
Yeah.
You're perfectly intersected where you have huge amounts of data, but without the slowness of being public or behemoth.
No, and I think, look, I mean, it's also the same with Tradeshift, absolutely, but also with Beyond Work, which is we know how to build enterprise-grade data isolation, security, how to load in these models. I mean, look, I've spent 14 years convincing the largest companies in the world to give me their supply chain data, put it in the cloud. The first time I did that, people are like, you're insane. That is never going to happen. Do you think that some of the largest phone manufacturers in the world are going to give you all the supply data? That's the tax you got to pay to get to those proprietary data. And to pay that tax, you got to have a full understanding of compliance, regulatory, all of these things, but you can't be Google or whatever, because then you just have too many lawyers that's going to say no.
Are you excited or are you scared or nervous?
All of the above, I think. I mean, I keep being nervous about.
Because I can't predict my job in 2 years, which is very strange for a venture investor to say.
Yeah. I mean, you can at least, if anything else, you can sort of probably license your IP to have some AI keep doing the podcast. So.
Oh, the media company's fine. But whether they're going to remove investors.
I know, but on the investment side, right? I mean, Beyond Work, we worked with Moonfire, and they're really interesting because they actually tried to build an AI-first venture fund. Yeah. They went out with a real framework, invested heavily in, using data science, LLMs for the flows, workflow, all of these things. So I think that world is going to be blown up completely. And you ask me, am I scared? I'm a bit nervous about what's going to happen, but I'm mostly excited. I think it's fun when things are up in the air and we don't know.
Very un-Scandinavian of you. Listen, I want to finish on a quick fire round. So I say a short statement. You give me your immediate thoughts.
Sure.
Okay, you can have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive. Who would you have dinner with and why?
That's a really good question. I would love to talk to Steve Jobs still. I think he would be one of the most brilliant people to have a discussion with.
Will more dollars be deployed in AI next year or this year?
Next year.
Is that in companies or like dollars, do you think?
Both.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a massive concentration in dollars, but fewer companies. I think the explosion of excitement's meant that everyone and their dog gets $8.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will still be a lot of money going into the long tail, but you're right that the concentration will happen in the top. But I think ultimately there will still be more companies getting funded just because some of the smartest people I know are just starting to boot up on it now. They spend a year or two thinking, looking a little bit at the hype, and now they're really getting into it. And I think those startups are going to really crush it and avoid a lot of the early generation mistakes.
What do you think happens to financing markets? So let's be honest, they were ready to be on their knees, ready to be on their knees, and then this is the fucking crack cocaine that venture needed.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's interesting, right? Because, I mean, you're seeing even very big names scrambling to get access to deal flow. At
$4 billion prices for nothing.
Yeah, and so I think that's going to be really, really hard. I think for the market, what's going to happen? I mean, look, if you were there when the world switched from on-prem to cloud and you could have written the checks, there was a few people who did, right? Like Reid Hoffman, he just walked around in San Francisco and looked for any startup that has survived 2008 and just gave them money. There's going to be something similar, and probably we need a good culling first. But I do think there's going to be something similar happening in this paradigm shift here.
What would you most like to change about the world of AI?
I mean, actually not a whole lot. One of the things I was talking to Steve Krashen, he's a former head of product at DeepMind, and we were both talking about the same thing, which was, he's like, if you go back 5-6 years, it was like AI was made by the cathedrals like Google, and it was like really serious scientists doing really serious stuff. And now people are hacking LLM models on Discord, and so we have this underground that's now just hacking and building everywhere. And I think that community is really, really fun. I mean, we are part of a number of like other startups, and everyone is in Discord, by the way, now. I mean, it's so crazy. Like nobody is on Slack that I know in this environment. It feels very, very different from anything I've ever been part of. So I wouldn't change a whole lot. I mean, maybe slow down the papers a little bit so we can have time to read them, because it's like 100 new papers every day. And yeah.
If you could invest in one seed fund, what seed fund would you invest in?
That's a good question. I mean, apart from, of course, 20VC, but I think I would probably pick somebody like Moonfire, and it has a lot to do with the philosophy and how they're optimizing. Again, I have a very mixed record as a seed investor myself. I haven't picked one yet.
That suggests not always successful. What did you learn from not the successes in seed investing?
I think I learned that just because, I mean, it's a classic thing, like just because you have a great product and a great business model, I mean, if the market is wrong, the market is wrong. And it doesn't matter how much you pound, like, or fight or whatever.
Market, traction, founder.
Yeah.
How do you weight them 1 through 3?
1, because that is sort of my primary, I mean, if I have a hidden edge, is I know, and I typically had invested in startups coming out of Denmark because there's a small network and a lot of them go to San Francisco and so on. So founder is first, because if I know who they are and I know what they've done, and I invested in quite a bit of the Tradeshift alumni, right? So I know those guys. That's the first. But then today I would say market, and I probably flipped it before and said traction and then market.
Okay, next 10 years for you. When we have this conversation in 10 years, I hope we do it much sooner. I've missed you. But like 10 years time, where is Christian then?
I'm hopefully doing something I'm really enjoying doing and having fun. And I'm not thinking about why I hate my work or why I need to just take a break. I don't know what that is. And actually that is exciting. I'm completely open to what that could be.
I think this has been one of the best shows I've done in a long, long time, which I also find heavily ironic because, as you'll see, there was no schedule for this.
Yeah.
I literally was like, all right, okay, let's have a good chat. But thank you so much for joining me, and I've loved this.
Thank you so much, Harry. I really enjoyed it.